our apologies for that. They are tremendously impacted right now.
Okay, it's 5 p.m. I suggest we get started.
Okay, well, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to call the public hearing open.
Not yet.
No,
Not yet. No.
okay.
Let me
Only when the
explain.
public speaks, and then we do the CEO report first, and then we'll open it.
So, and I apologize to the public for perhaps our agenda being confusing. So the order of things will be this. We will start off with the verbal report from Justin and David, our consultants on the topic. They will do their report, and then the board will have the opportunity to ask them questions and engage in that process. At that point in time, then we would open the public hearing and then take the questions from the public.
Okay, so then the public will hear the benefit of the board's comments and questions.
Exactly.
That's perfect. Thank you.
And the presentation. And then we would, after we finish the public hearing, I recommend we go ahead, since we're on the topic, to finish the California legislative redistricting process that's been going on, and then circle back to the Senate reports.
Great.
Okay.
And I just see David is joining us as soon as he's admitted. So that's great. All right. We're take it away, Dr. Kuhn.
Okay, I'm gonna, at this point in time, welcome Justin Rich and David Saldani. I know David just joined us, and I believe I'm handing it off at this point to Justin to start the process.
Great, thank you for having me tonight. Tonight I'm going to be going through a couple of map scenarios that we prepared for you all. So I'm going to walk through that. Not only will we go through the geographic layout and how those different trustee areas run, but then also walk through some of the demographic characteristics as well. Try to give you a little background on how we approached each one of these scenarios, and give you a little, if it's not apparent from how those trustees are drawn, those trustee areas are drawn, try to give you a little background on what we were trying to do and how we were trying to mix different neighborhoods and communities together, ultimately looking for feedback from you all on what works better for better representation. So I'm going to share my screen and these slides. Hold on one second. Oh no.
While you're doing that, I'm just curious if the Brady I saw show up was Brady Beavis. No, there's a Brady here.
It is not showing what I want it to.
Possibilities.
Should have rehearsed this better. Well, we'll try this. You may see yourselves in the corner here. I'll try to send that off to the side. All right, can everyone see those maps?
No.
Yes, you can.
Scenario one is showing up on the screen right now.
Perfect. That's what I intended to show. So let me just start by saying the way that we approached drawing these maps, we looked at a few different things. What's logical to us is to look at the cities that the community college district serves, also to look at various neighborhoods. And I'll note that as we're going through the redistricting process with Marin COE, there have been several neighborhoods that we have heard might make more sense to be included in a particular area. So we've tried to incorporate some of that feedback as well. We've also looked at major roads for the most part, to the extent that we can. Oftentimes we may not be able to get an entire city within a single area, as is likely evident from both of our scenarios. So then we look to major roads when we have to split those. And then finally, what we tried to do is, from a federal voting rights perspective, we looked at the largest protected class, that Hispanic Latino population, and look to see if we could create larger numbers of them in a particular trustee area. I think David will tell you, David Saldani will tell you that we should try to do that just to see what the sensitivity is and how much potential concentration there is so that we can keep those voters in those protected classes with a single voice. So with that context, I'll go through both of these scenarios. Now, in the maps that you've seen, we have the large map that is blown up so that you can see the entire boundaries of the district, but obviously it's harder to see some of the details. So we've also included a additional map that really focuses in on the San Rafael area and the southern part of Novato. And that's what you see now. We've overlaid the various jurisdictional boundaries, both cities and towns served by the community college district. And so what we were trying to do in this scenario, and it may take some kind of toggling back and forth, but we really started off in the area of Novato, sort of the north central part of the district. Just given the geographic location of that area and knowing that the city of Novato's boundaries are concentrated in that corner of the district, we started there with Trustee Area 1, just to the geographic nature of where that's located. We also looked at Trustee Area 7, and the way the trustee areas are numbered, you'll see that they really work in a clockwise manner, starting with the area around Novato and then moving clockwise to Trustee Area 7 along the coast. And so knowing that, first of all, we have that unique geographical area that's in Novato, that sort of hook that is there that's served by the community college district. And then knowing that we have sparsely populated coastal and mountainous areas or rural areas, we use those really as our two kind of linchpins here. You'll note that in Trustee Area 1, again, it covers the majority of the city of Novato. And then in Trustee Area 2, it covers the southern portion of the city and then captures some of northern San Rafael and parts of the unincorporated communities in between. So I'll go back to the zoomed in version here so you can see. In Trustee Area 3, which is the blue area here, this is more downtown San Rafael. There is a stronger concentrated of the protected class east of the 101 and downtown, so we tried to keep that together. And then Trustee Area 4 is the area of western San Rafael. Is that right? Do I have that? Or, excuse me, yes. The green area is Trustee Area 3 and the blue area is Trustee Area 4. I'll note just a couple of things, and this came up during our discussions with the County Office of Education, is trying to include the Bret Harte neighborhood along with that eastern part or the western part of San Rafael, and also the Lincoln neighborhood as well. So in this particular scenario, we were able to capture that. Trustee Area 5 captures Tiburon, Larkspur, and Corte Madera. It also has a small portion of the city of Mill Valley. And then Trustee Area 6 has Sausalito and a majority of Mill Valley. Now, Trustee Area 7 is unique just because of the distance between the top of the area and, really the distance you have to travel to go from one end to the other. So in this particular scenario, it really ends at Highway 1, where it sort of turns southwest to northeast. And so it captures some of the central part of that rural and mountainous region and also includes the coastal regions as well. So just a couple of reflections, and let's see if I can do this knowing, yeah, here we go. So in this particular scenario, and for each one of the maps, we've also included the demographic breakdown. And there's a couple of things that I've mentioned previously, but I'm going to highlight here. First of all, when we're looking to balance populations in accordance with the constitutional requirement, the one person, one vote, we use the total census. So that's every person that is counted within a geographic area by census block. In our case, we look at the total population, all of the people that reside in that area. And based on that calculation, what we see is a variance between the largest and the smallest area. In this case, the largest area is trustee area 1. It's about 2.6% over the ideal. And then the smallest is trustee area 2 at minus 1.7 or negative 1.7%. So the total variance is 4.3%. I'll just remind you that our target is to be less than 10%. And what David Soldani would tell you and may tell you is that the legal presumption is that anything less than 10% is allowable and that we are well within that threshold. I'll also point to the citizen voting age population. And the citizens by voting age population is something that's collected by the American Community Survey. This is a division of the census, and they do this survey every single year. And one of the things that they capture is the folks that are eligible to vote based on age and also their citizenship status. And this really is a measure of the voting strength of a particular protected class. And so we're paying close attention to that. And what you'll see is in trustee area 3, the largest protected class is the Hispanic Latino voters at 13.5%. We're not approaching a majority we're not approaching even a plurality here, but we are just interested to see, do the changes that we make split those groups in a particular way? Is there a way to bring more of them together and concentrate more of them to the benefit of their voice at the ballot box? So that is scenario 1. And let me see if I can toggle back here. And so with that said, here is scenario 2. And I'll tell you that in this case, starting with trustee area 1, we took a little bit different approach to trustee area 1. And what we did is we sort of rotated the eastern boundary of trustee area 1 away from 37 and to the coast of Novato here, picking up a little bit less in the more rural mountainous area, and then consequently taking trustee area 2 and reaching a little bit further westward, not crossing over 101 as much, and just taking a little bit different approach to that area between Novato, so southern Novato and north San Rafael. Trustee area 3 stays on the eastern side of 101, and then trustee area 4 really fought, and I'll go to the next slide here so you can see more clearly. And trustee area 4, you can see also reaches a little bit further into the western part of the district there. I will note that in terms of the boundary, you'll see there is a road. Again, we look for major roads to divide along when we can. It makes good sense as far as we're concerned, because oftentimes those roads can be the boundaries for various communities of interest. And this is Manuel Te Freitas Parkway is the kind of hump that is at the top of trustee area 4. So another big difference in this scenario, and I think a point of discussion, is the fact that trustee area 7 reaches all the way from the northern part of the district to the southern part of the district, all along the coast there. And while that's somewhat the case in scenario 1, it goes even further in scenario 2, stretching past Highway 1. So that is one thing that just kind of popped out to us. That's a long way to travel. And I would imagine that those folks down in, the Mill Valley area may be different than what we would see in the north coastal part of the district. So just a food for thought, but in the attempt to balance population more in the population centers and around the cities, this is one of the effects of doing that. So I'm going to go to the demographic breakdown here. What you will see in this scenario, again, when we look at variance between the largest and the smallest population, we have a variance of 2.3%. So it's lower than what we had in scenario 1. In this particular case, the largest area is trustee area 2 at 1.2% above the ideal size, and the smallest area is trustee area 4 at negative 1.1%. In terms of citizens by voting age population, again, trustee area 3 has the largest concentration of a protected class, the Hispanic, Latino eligible voters based on citizen voting age population at 14.1%. So those changes that we did make did affect trustee area 3 by slightly boosting the concentration of that protected class in that district. So that's what I have to share tonight, but I'm sure there may be some questions. Happy to answer that, and either myself or David can field those based on the nature of the question.
Thank you, Justin. Did David want to make some preliminary comments first?
No, I think I'll just reserve my comments to respond to any questions that the trustees might have. I do apologize for not being on camera. I am driving to my next board meeting, which is a live board meeting.
Ah. Well, welcome. Glad you're here with us and working with us.
Likewise.
Okay, Stephanie O'Brien is the first trustee with her hand up.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the presentation, Justin. It goes into much more detail than was able to be extrapolated from the, just viewing the handouts. Just a comment that I would have, the difference between scenario 1 and scenario 2 and I'm right now, I'm in what would be trustee area 7. In both cases, the population, there's an expression we use for those of us who live over the hill, not just over 60, but over White's Hill. The population is very different. The demographics are very different than in the majority of Marin County. And what concerns me about both scenario 1 and 2 is in scenario 1, the representative could live in San Anselmo. In scenario 2, the representative could live in Mill Valley. So, is that person an appropriate representative of that population? So I just wanted to articulate that. I think it's a little bit problematic on both. I see the differences in the percentage citizens by voting age, percentage by demographic is about the same, meaning about 5.3% Hispanic, so in either of those two scenarios. So there's not a huge advantage there in either one, but I just thought I would add my comments on that.
Certainly. Yeah, and that's something that jumped out to us as well. Yeah.
Next trustee Conti.
So I will kind of speak from the opposite end of trustee area 7 in scenario 2, and that is that there's not a big community of interest between people, quote unquote, over the hill and Mill Valley. There's geographically, it's a huge difference, and it's not southern. Mill Valley is not, to cut it in half at Miller Avenue doesn't really make any sense in terms of how it really works for people or what their sensibilities are or their needs or their priorities. If you live closer to the coast, it's so like where I live, it's only 2.5 miles to downtown Mill Valley. Everything's centered on that. The whole approach is different than in more rural areas. So it doesn't seem to make logical sense to me. And I think, and I don't think it's particularly great representation for Southern Marin. Let's leave it at that.
Any other trustees with questions or comments?
You might want to
Trustee
call
Yoshi?
on Dr. Long if she's on the call. So.
Oh, I can't, should she raise, okay, trustee De Silva raised his hand and then we'll go to trustee Long and see if she has anything. Trustee De Silva.
I have to ask you two questions. One, is it possible to get a map with the overlay of the school districts? Because I know you made reference to the Marin County of Education going through this process also, and that might help people to visualize where those communities of other schools are. And then a question about, I guess, just the logic of or the hierarchy, the classification of maps. If you go past this, would there be a series of maps that you could make from tweaking scenario 1? And would there be a series of maps that you could make by tweaking scenario 2? And is that the way you might approach it? Or maybe you didn't think about that. Maybe it's something completely different.
No,
Justin, can you comment on the MCOE piece first relative to our different boundaries and so forth?
You bet. Yeah. And there is a difference in the boundaries as you all are aware of. In terms of total population, they serve more folks just because I think it's Santa Rosa Junior College carves out a piece. And so that's sort of in the, you'll see the County of Marin boundaries. There's a piece just south of Sonoma County there that is not in your district. So the population piece is different, but we certainly can produce a map that just shows what those K-12 boundaries are. That is a point of emphasis for the County Office of Ed. And certainly we can do that.
I would note, I have looked at those and I think there's a big difference between the cleanness of this and what happens when it's recertifying a previously approved mapping system, because theirs have these little tiny sections that are drawn out a couple of streets and it doesn't look anything neat like this. Maybe you could comment on that, Justin.
Yeah, and I think David Saldani would echo that. You really are engaged in two different processes where they do have to sort of tweak and make small adjustments to bring into balance. The county supervisorial districts will be the same, whereas you're starting from, you're starting fresh here with a clean slate. I do hear often that it's helpful to look at other local agencies and how they've approached it, and I think that gives some comfort in certain cases. And so, again, happy to include those K-12 boundaries if that's a helpful point of reference. So yes, we can do that. And then just real quickly, in terms of your question about doing the various iterations, there's any number of ways that we can do it, and it really goes to what your preference is. We can take scenario 1 and turn that into scenario 1A and 1B and 1C. We can take, do the same thing with scenario 2, or other districts have just approached it where they just keep counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's really up to you, and it's your prerogative. If it's helpful for, again, a point of reference as to how we started out, to include that scenario 1 and then 1A and so on and so forth. Again, it's whatever is easiest for you all to be able to, kind of contextualize this.
Trustee Long, did you have comments or questions?
I do. Justin, I am curious about all the possibilities of assumptions that you have made by doing map 1 and then also map 2, because our guidance is going to be from each other, meaning board members talking together and across the geographic lines to understand, just as Diana Conti spoke to how different Mill Valley area is and the differences. And it's really helpful to understand that, you know, we're just configuring groups of people, but we really don't know necessarily each other's uniqueness in terms of the ones we currently represent. So I need to get a handle on what was the criteria that you use. You said a few of them, but what, in a comprehensive way, can you identify like some of the things that you considered when you began moving pieces and parts? So one thing that I know was not mentioned at all was we serve a population of people who live around the campuses. So however you want to define it, it's important that the community that we represent in the where the colleges is or are is very important, because they will have more identification because the campus is near. An example would be, it's always surprising to me when south of us, how they identify so quickly with College Marin, even though they have to drive quite a distance to get to the college. And same with Novato, you know, they will cross over in the northern part just because the campus is there. So, you know, for me, it is, where's the campus and where, and in terms of, I try not to forget why we're doing this. The reason why we're doing this is to create diversity of adults who might run for the college board. Right now, we all represent the whole county. So when we break into smaller parts, it may be that the identification might get lost, or it might enhance itself. So I just need to know what's the criteria that we use to split up certain streets, or, you know, the more the details. Does that make sense?
It does. That's a great question. The primary consideration has to do with balancing populations. And so when we look at balanced, it doesn't mean the geographic area or the area that's covered just in terms of the amount of land. It has to do with the number of people. That is our primary consideration when we go into this, because it really is a numbers game. How do we have enough folks within a given area that we have parity? So everyone's vote is roughly weighted the same. And I think that's the that's our primary consideration. In this case, what we've also done is we've looked at the various cities and jurisdictions that are within your boundaries, and to the extent that we can, try to keep them whole, or at least try not to split them up as too often. And the nature of it is, I think that there's just too much population in Novato, for instance, and San Rafael. And so those cities inevitably get split, and where we split them are the best solution we have for that is to split those areas along major roads and highways to the extent we can, and also balancing that with trying to keep various neighborhoods together. And so that's the way that we've approached this. Again, there's unique topography and there's unique population densities in each one of these areas. And so as we literally go census block by census block and try to figure out where those should be assigned, those are the primary considerations that we're keeping in mind. Now, Admittedly, we are map makers that do not live in your community and understand those communities as well as you do. And so hopefully an outgrowth of this process is that we get some more feedback that, supplements our understanding, what we've learned working with the COE, what we've heard from the conversations with the County Board of Supervisors, and try to supplement our data analysis with some of these concepts and things that have been brought up. So that's the criteria for doing this. First of all, they have to be balanced in terms of population, and then how we make those other determinations looks at cities, neighborhoods, and major roads. And that's really our primary focus in how we come up with these scenarios. Now, there's any different number of ways that we can do that. And so that's why we've started here with a couple of different scenarios. But to Trustee De Silva's point, we plan to do additional scenarios that perhaps address things that don't work as well. There was a comment about Trustee Area 7, 2 comments in fact that the folks in the more north coast over the hill versus Mill Valley. The question would be then, if that's the case, and we know that we have to have balanced populations, do we then take Trustee Area 7 and grab a piece of San Rafael? Do we grab a piece of Novato? There are dominoes that fall as a result of that. And it becomes this question of, do we keep folks that are more, that have a different sort of sense of community separate, or do we start to include them in other areas?
And so this really highlights the importance of these public hearings. It is to, start from the starting point that we have, and to hear from not only from the trustees, but from members of the public and others who are on the ground and who are residents, because statistically speaking, it is mathematically impossible to keep every single city intact and enclosed within one area, or every single community completely whole and intact. And so really it's a balancing act, understanding that everything is really subservient to balancing the total population. And so the issue then becomes knowing that we have to make it a division within certain communities. Where are the logical points to make those divisions? And that's where your feedback is so very important and so very helpful in this process.
Right. So some of my concerns are that when we start moving populations around, people have to speak up and feel free to speak up about what it does. So what I caution us about is de facto segregation, which we don't want to do, meaning that if we cluster certain groups in some form or fashion, that they continue to promote segregation, then we're not doing the job adequately for the purpose that we're trying to do. Does that make sense?
Well, I think, Trustee Long, the last time we had the discussion with our demographer, it was acknowledged that there is no scenario that will allow for a minority majority representation in Marin. But what was presented was that the Latinx community is predominantly in Trustee Area 3, and that we're doing all that we can to maximize the potential for that minority vote to perhaps put someone on the board.
I'm not sure I understand what did you just say?
Just said that it's not possible.
Oh, you were quoting what the demographers did.
Well, Justin, you go ahead.
Sure.
I'm just trying not to repeat what we did at the last meeting, and that mindful of the public hearing has to go forward.
Maybe the term majority minority district just needs to be a little more clear.
Sure. A majority protected class district as defined by the Federal Voting Rights Act. If we were able to accomplish that, that would be something that we should do, so that we are not dividing that protected class, that community, in a way that lessens their ability to elect the candidate of their choice. And so we looked at ways of doing that. The numbers just don't work here. But what we tried to do is to get as high a number as possible. Again, that's in trustee area 3. Just the way that population is, it's not concentrated the way it might be in other areas, and it's fairly well dispersed. So that's how we ended up there. I just want, that's what we looked at doing, and that is another primary, that is a primary consideration for us going into this. And that's why we looked at specifically the citizens voting age population percentages for that protected class in each scenario.
And I would just add that both scenarios are legal under state and federal regulations. We would not put an illegal map in front of you for consideration.
Thank you.
Illegal. Right.
Okay, thank you. Any other trustees, questions, comments? I saw a couple of hands and then they went back down. So we might be ready to go on the public comment. I had a couple of questions. Is it true that scenario 1 provides that we don't have any trustee overlap?
That is correct.
And is it possible within the lines that have been drawn that we really are looking at maintaining, for the most part, along major roadways, maintaining communities of existing communities? And I had a question relative to where like Ross is in this picture and San Anselmo. If San Anselmo then in trustee area, I had a hard time figuring out which one was 3 and which one was
7.
It's in 7, Wendy.
in 7. San Anselmo's all in 7 too?
It's split between 7 and 4. And I admittedly, looking at this right now, it is hard to distinguish.
Yeah, I
those
couldn't
two
tell
colors.
because they were both shades
Yeah.
of blue of sorts.
Yeah,
Okay,
I think,
maybe we could have a map with a little different colors so we could see that, because I
You
do
bet.
think when you can separate that out, it
Yeah.
does make sense. It also gives us room to move when the Novato population, if that's where, I mean, if another question I had that might be more for David, the ADUs, or the next time around, I guess we're going to be able to count everyone. And we may in fact have greater density if some of the housing legislation actually turns into reality. But there seems to be a way that we won't look so much like the cookie cutter that MCOE is, that there's room to move here in this particular scenario. And that's kind of a question, Justin, is that true?
yeah, so just to your point about future population growth as a result of, development generally, and also that, the legislation. I can foresee, it's hard for us to, we can't in fact balance just based on a projection, but perhaps you might look at an area that is currently smaller relative to the other areas and say, well, that's not such a bad thing because we know over time that area may grow. So I don't think that's I think that's a valid rationale, so long as you're within the 10% population balance. And, I think David would reiterate that you wouldn't want to go outside of that unless you had a very compelling rationale and open yourself potentially up to challenge.
All right. I think if I'm not mistaken, all the trustees have asked their questions. I think this was very thorough to both David and Justin. Thank you very much. And am I correct? Keep moving on. Now we're going to enter into the public hearing. Is that true? Is everyone ready?
That's correct.
So-
We did have one public comment as well that Mickey would like to read. And then
Okay, well, so we will move now from the CEO report section to, we will open the public hearing. Is there a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Motion by Crow, second by,
Second.
Whatever.
thank you, trustee Cranenberg. Roll call, please.
Trustee Crow,
Aye.
trustee De Silva,
Aye.
trustee Cranenberg,
Aye.
trustee Long,
I'm going to say no for now because I don't think we've exhausted the questions by the trustees.
Okay, trustee O'Brien,
Aye.
trustee Yoshihara,
Aye.
trustee Conti, aye, trustee Trainer.
Aye, thank you. Mickey, would you please read the first public comment?
The first public comment was submitted by Dawood Anderson Zafir, and he would like to make a suggestion. I'm commenting to suggest that the by-trustee area voting map redistricting be along the boundaries indicated by scenario 1. After looking at both maps, it seems to me that scenario 1 is more representative of Marin as a whole in terms of differing viewpoints, needs, and social standings. I believe that it has the potential to lead to a college board with a broad scope of understanding in regards to what can potentially benefit the future students of College of Marin.
Thank you. All right. Any other members of the public that would like to speak?
Yes.
I'll acknowledge Brady.
Yes. Hi. I just thought I would throw in something from a.
It is the Brady that I asked earlier, right?
Yes, it is. And I'm so happy to see your faces. I missed you.
Hi,
I
Judy.
just wanted to mention from a public perspective, which I am now, and the identity of interest from individual voters and the community that we serve, or you serve, from College of Marin is really important, I think. For example, people in Novato, as we all know, have a very, very strong sense of identity of interest. They identify as family-oriented town, you know, and they have a lot of diversity and the highest number of retired police and firemen of any place else in Marin, and in fact, in California, et cetera, et cetera. They have a lot of things they could make lists of. Every person on the street, you stop them and you just ask, who lives in Novato? And they'll give you a demographic answer. So it seems like this plan is going to be greatly helpful for people to be able to know exactly who they have to go to. And that person can strongly represent that demographic and that identity of interest. And of course, because of my love of the Indian Valley campus, it also allows for a stronger participation and voice in the fact of getting people to be able to have more students to be able to go there. So I would strongly urge the map number 1 as actually seeming to, apparently to me, really supplies that need. And because it also takes out Mill Valley as a single entity, Novato as 2. And I think you've done a really good job, by the way, consultants, on dividing up Novato into geographically. That is pretty much how it's identified. The Hamilton has its own, you know, younger families and demographic, and so does Pacheco Valley. So thank you for putting together a really good representative map, and we appreciate it out here in the community and the voters.
Thank you, Brady. Good to see you and hear you.
You too.
Any other public comment? Trustee Yoshihira, do you have any comments or thoughts about what it looks like for you in the future should you run in the next 10 years? Well, trying to draw you out. Okay. Any other comments, Trustee Long? Was there a burning issue? I mean, I think you covered your points, but respectfully, was there something else?
Well, the only thing I would recommend is taking a look at the how compatible is it with the county supervisor's map. We don't have to be like them, but at least do we even resemble somewhat of their district? Just a curiosity.
Well, as we discussed in our last meeting on the subject, they have 5 seats, we have 7. So it's not an easy overlay, but I believe that what you're asking is more of a general concept of 5 versus 7 districts. Any other comments or questions?
Yeah, I would just say that I think it really is a problem that the interactive tool is not working, because we're thinking about things, thinking about possible change, but we can't actually use the tool that we were promised was going to be available to really make our own maps. I mean, that was going to be one of the main features, the main advantages of this whole process, that it was going to be interactive. We were going to be able to produce our own maps, and now we can't do it. So is there any better timeline for when that's going to be available? I mean, I hope it's going to be available a reasonable amount of time before our December meeting. Otherwise, I mean, we basically are not going to get any advantage of it.
I can follow up and try to get a better timeline and communicate that to Dr. Kuhn.
David Saldani, in this David reference, can you just overview for the board now our next steps in terms of our next meeting? It's kind of a repeat of this one. Can the board have another meeting? Should we need more discussion once we have an opportunity to use the interactive tool? What's your thoughts about next steps?
So based on what I've observed at this meeting, I would say that this is us, and you have a degree of flexibility. The law kind of sets a floor, but not a ceiling. And so the floor is we have to have a minimum of 2 public hearings after maps have been drawn. This is the first of those 2. Now, there is nothing that says that you cannot have a third or a subsequent meeting if circumstances dictate, if that's the desire of the majority of the trustees. Based on some of the feedback, it sounds to me like there is a preference for scenario 1, but perhaps we can make some changes to reflect some of the feedback that we received from the trustees as to scenario 1. And that could be brought back to the second public hearing. I'm not sure when that redistricting tool will be available, but if it's the desire of the board to schedule a subsequent meeting after that becomes available, should it not be available prior to December, that is totally within this governing board's discretion and purview. But ultimately, what we have to do before the final adoption, any new map that's created, by law, we have to post it at least 7 days, make it publicly available 7 days before a public hearing on that. So as we are making changes, we're going to make sure that those are posted well in advance of any subsequent public hearing at which it could be considered for adoption. But again, it's the second post-map hearing is after which you can make that final selection, but that doesn't preclude you from having additional hearings. If you know the majority does not coalesce around a final version, if there's still some tinkering that needs to happen, you have that flexibility, both legally and from a practical timeline standpoint.
David,
I hope that
Dr.
helps.
Kuhn, we also have to go through the chancellor's office, and what was our drop dead date, as they
right,
say?
that was actually going to be my question to David. I don't have that in front of me. David, do you know off the top of your head when our drop dead date was to work back from submission?
Yeah, you need to have everything has to be done, which means all approvals, the Board of Governors, all of that, plus the actual electronic shape files transmitted to the Registrar of Voters, that has to be completed in late spring, okay? Because you elect in November, this change has to take effect at least 130 days prior to that election. So if you think about it, it's generally going to be June. But of course, we're kind of far along in the process, and I don't know that we want to drag this on for another 6 months. But the fact is, we do have additional time if the board thinks that it is appropriate to take it. It's available.
So
Okay,
perhaps
so I think, go ahead,
I was
Dr.
going to say, perhaps we regroup, we do the work between now and December, and then at December we ask the question of the board: are we ready? Do we feel like we need more hearings?
Well, and I think to Trustee De Silva's point, I mean, some of what we were passionate about was the opportunity that Novato had when they actually had citizens participating and doing some of the iterative process. And in fact, they chose a map developed by one of the citizens. So I think part of it is, what we may have contracted to receive and what we may get out of it, and not just us, the board, but more the community is what I'm thinking. So the board needs to talk about that. I don't think there was any support for scenario 2. So I think that we really are looking at how do we make sure we're comfortable with scenario 1 and that it we're ready to move forward with that after we have our second public hearing. So I think that's something the board can talk about. David?
And I would just add one piece to that. In some districts will do kind of a separate public outreach effort where they will set up like a public forum, kind of like an open house format. You can do it virtually or you can do it live, where members of the public can just, roll in during certain hours that it's made available, and they can look at the maps, they can ask the demographer questions, they can provide draft maps, or really engage kind of directly outside of a formal public hearing. And then oftentimes what we'll do is at the conclusion of that process, we will summarize the feedback from the public and present that as we embark on a subsequent public hearing. We can say, after going through this kind of community forum process, here's the consensus. We've had 5 individuals who, for example, expressed a preference for map 1. There were a couple of comments about moving the line that currently divides Mill Valley and moving it over here to the left or to the right. And so that's an additional process that the board has the discretion to engage in if it wishes to do so. It's not required legally, but it is a process that some entities will engage in that are embarking upon this endeavor.
Okay.
I remember talking
have,
with go ahead, Eva.
Trustee Long?
I have a question about the calendar, meaning come another week, Thanksgiving is happening, and then another four weeks in December, and most people are not paying attention. We probably, if we knew more like a year ago, we might have started at a different time and then end up before the holidays. So my concern is exactly what the demographer said, is that we are a very engaging community, and not to have them have time or interest, or it's not even interest, going out in the rainstorms that we've been having in recent weeks is not really conducive to having people come live to any place. So I'm just concerned about the fact that once we put out, it's okay to put out the map if all of you think it's ready to be done, but at the same time, if we don't get a lot of community voices during the first go around, we may not actually get what we set out to do. That's all. It's about the process.
Okay, just putting in context.
If I can just add one, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in context, we had no control over a pandemic, which is a lot of why the information was not available for us to draw the districts. David?
Yeah, and the
I was
right.
I was going to say exactly that. We didn't wait to start the process. The data wasn't available until the end of September.
I know the census was held up. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Trustee De Silva?
Well, I was talking to Stuart Tannenberg over the weekend. He reminded me that he had worked with Trustee O'Brien on the Novato project. And the amazing thing about that, or a distinctive feature of that process, was the involvement of students. And I just wonder, where are we with involving our students? Has there been any outreach, or has there been any interest from students?
There has been multiple attempts to invite faculty to involve students.
And the board does not invite students, I might add. A faculty member should be approaching Dr. Kuhn on something like that, and then the process would be to go through that.
So before Mia left, we had a number of attempts to invite various faculty to be a part of the process.
Okay, well, thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think there's any other comments. Did people feel like we heard from, I know Ann Wakely was here, the League of Women Voters were here, Paul Cohen, Marin Democrats, and Sandy Bowen, and we had Brady Beavis. I mean, this was a good party of people. Thank you for coming. We appreciate having you here. We're grateful for your interest. May I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by O'Brien, second by Cranenberg. Roll call, please.
Trustee Crow.
Yes.
Trustee De Silva,
Yes.
trustee Kradenberg,
Aye.
trustee Long,
Aye.
trustee O'Brien,
Aye.
trustee Yoshihara,
Aye.
trustee Conti, aye, trustee Trainer.
Aye, thank you very much. Now we will move to what we skipped, which is Senate reports, then Senate and student reports.